Good morning. It's Tuesday, and that means we're here on Writers Chat, where craft connects community. Did I get that one right that time? You'd think I'd be able to say those three words so easily, but I get the C's all mixed up. But anyway, we're really glad to have you with us, whether you're here right now in person as we're recording or watching the replay. My name is Johnny Alexander. I'm joined by co-hosts Melissa Stroh, Brandy Bro, and Norma Poor. And I'm going to turn it over to Melissa so she can introduce today's very, very special guest.
Good morning, everybody. We're so glad you're here today and very excited to have a returning guest with us. It's been a little while since Becky's been here with us, but not too long ago. And we were just chatting before we were on here how much we love to cross promote each other's groups. And one of the groups who's a good friend of Writers Chat, and we like to be good friends with them too, is the 540. And so we have a lot of friends there with us today who are no strangers to our guests. But for those of you who might be watching this for the first time or joining us for the first time today and don't know who Becky is, I'm going to share a little bit about her. Becky Antkowiak, or Becky Blue, is director of the Right to Publish Conference, executive director of the nonprofit 540 Writers Community, and chief encouragement officer of the Christian Writers Institute. Becky Blue works to equip writers with the confidence, clarity, and deep connection they need to impact their readers' lives. Her passion is shattering barriers to writer education. A storyteller at heart, Becky Blue champions the idea that books can lead readers to deep faith, true peace, and unconditional love. And known for her infectious enthusiasm and signature blue hair, a fundraiser for Compassion International, she is dedicated to supporting underserved writers. Today, she's going to share with us When God Ignores Your Perfect Plans, which I think we can all kind of relate to. And so, this is going to be a great one to listen to, Becky. I'm excited to hear your story today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be back. I love hopping on a writer's chat when I can. And lately it hasn't been as often as I would like, but I don't really get to do anything as often as I would like right now because I'm juggling 40 million things and working really hard to figure out what I can put down. And so far, I haven't been able to choose one thing. So, and then people are like, hey, would you like to do X? And I'm like, ooh, that sounds fun too. So. I'm definitely not someone to follow if you're trying to simplify your life. But thankfully, I have some incredibly wonderful people who help. So I am
Yeah.
thankful for that. Um, so I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, but before we get started, I would like to ask you a question. So if you don't know how to use the raise hand feature down at the bottom of your screen, uh, you'll either see it under the react button or most recently I had an actual raise hand button on my screen, which was weird and I don't see now. So I don't know what makes the difference. Um, but when I asked this question, if you can use the raise hand feature, if it's under react, there will be a bar that says raise hand and you can click that and then you'll have to unraise your hand to take it back down. But if your life is not exactly the way you expected it to be at any other time in your life, I want you to click the raise hand button. So if you fully expect it to be where you are, don't raise your hand. But
Have it.
you don't even have a raise hand button. Okay. So pretty much everyone, more or less, I think. Okay, so you can pull them back down. I just wanted to kind of get a sort of a temperature check because if you all were like, no, this is exactly what I expected, then maybe this wouldn't help you at all. Um, so, and if you have a question or something to say at the end, I don't know how Writers Chat normally does it, but at 540 we use the raise hand because then everybody knows, like, oh, that person is next, and it helps the
Mhm.
introverts feel a little more comfortable, and even some of the shy extroverts. Oh, so and so is going to be after me, or so and so is before me. Um,
That's
so
good.
anyway, also I don't multitask well, so if you put something in the chat, I'm just letting you know right now, I will not see it
Oh,
until the end. So
we'll help
just
you with that. Yeah,
Yeah,
don't worry
we'll
about
keep an
that.
eye.
okay, perfect. All right. So when Melissa asked me about this, I have to tell you, so my sister's name was Melissa, and every time I see your email come into my inbox, I'm like, oh, I got an email from Melissa. Oh, so it makes it like extra special. Um, but she asked me to talk a little bit about how I ended up sort of where I am, kind of thing. And I love this story not because it's about me, but because it's about how I misunderstood God most of my life. And I sometimes I just think he's just like, oh, here she goes again, you know. Um, but one of the main things that God used in my life to direct where I went and what I did and how I thought had a lot to do with the books that I was reading. And biographies, far and away, were my favorite and still are some of my favorite books to read. And so as a child, I read very, very early. I was 4. I don't ever actually remember learning to read, but I remember reading like chapter books when I was 4. Um, and I mean, like not like Dostoevsky or anything like that, but more than the normal 4-year-old. And by 7, I actually the Narnia series was something I received for my 7th birthday, and I only know this because my mom wrote it in the book, but I stayed up all night reading The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and finished the entire book in one night. So just voracious reader, and most of the time I had a book with me. I'm kind of thankful there weren't phones because I assume I would have gotten caught up in all of that, but the book was my smartphone. I was if I had, only one book, that was kind of odd. I always had a book and a backup book. Um, so the stories of Adoniram Judson and Hudson Taylor, George Mueller, if you haven't read those biographies, I highly recommend them. Um, Corrie ten Boom's The Hiding Place, which that's not technically a biography necessarily, but it sort of is a biography, in my opinion, of her sister Betsy. So those kinds of books really impacted me. So at age 8, when I read George Mueller's biography, that was the moment I knew when I grow up, I want to help kids who don't have parents, and my goal was to adopt. Um, and God paired me up with Patrick, who also had the plan of adopting before we even knew who we were going to marry. Both of us knew when I get married, I will adopt kids. So that was something that stayed from early on. But many of the other things that I picked up, I loved Jim Elliot's books and or the stories of Jim Elliot and reading Elizabeth Elliot's books, and even when I was in college read the journals of Jim Elliot, and that was neat because I don't remember the exact age I was, but whatever age it was the same age he was when he was writing the journals. And so to be able to read, his thoughts and his concerns and like, oh, am I really doing what God wants me to do? And the uncertainty and the certainty was really, really neat. So it's never I've never really stopped reading those stories, but in the beginning, I thought for sure, and for certain that I was supposed to be a missionary. And so from an early age, Ecuador was, I don't know, I mean, probably partly because of Jim, but just in general, like that was Ecuador and Brazil were always on my mind. And actually, when I was 5, a missionary came to our church from Brazil, and I don't know, apparently other churches do this differently. I thought this was like an every church thing until I told someone about it and they were like, what now? But we would have the missionaries who were home on furlough, they would come and speak. And then we would have this huge missions. Our church was actually not very big, which is kind of interesting thinking back. But they would have this huge like missions expo, and any of the missionaries that were home on furlough or in the area would come over and they'd put out a table with all the things about the country where they served, and they would talk about what they were doing in the country. And this one missionary from Brazil had Brazilian money on the table, and I thought that was neat. And I went into we had like a kid's bathroom, and I went into the bathroom, and someone had taken one of the bills, and but then they had left it in there. And so I brought it back to him and I said, I found this on the counter. Um, and I'm like, I saw it on your table earlier, so I know it's Brazilian. I think this is yours. And he said, well, I tell you what, you can keep that as long as when you grow up, you bring it back to me. And like that kind of solidified in my mind. I was like, well, I know my future, kind of thing. And so most of my young life and young adult life, I just assumed like, oh, that's what God wants me to do. And I still have the bill somewhere. I don't remember his name, and I tried finding it years ago and wasn't successful. But I thought it was a neat thing that he said because like he could have been like, "Oh, hey, thanks for bringing it back," and just set it on his table, and it wouldn't have had any impact. Um, so all that to say, the books, all of the input, talking to the people that I really respected in my life, many of them were missionaries. We had missionaries come stay at our house when I was young, and one of my good friends, she and I were pen pals because we were about the same age, and she was the daughter of the family, and they were going to Grenada. So, we kept in touch, and I got a lot more exposure, I guess, than probably the average kid to the whole idea of missions, and it was just like something I was obviously I'm going to do this. So I went to Bible college and to seminary, and even up through seminary, um, my plan was always, hey, this is what I'm supposed to do. And I actually went to school with a guy from Peru who had grown up under Jim Elliot's brother, who worked in Peru. And so that, kind of solidified it further. It's like, oh, this connection that, like, obviously this is something that I'm supposed to do. Um, and then after college, it didn't really pan out. And kind of backing up into college, I started out in elementary ed, and um, the teacher of one of the early courses, part of, I think, their weeding out process really was to assign you to a classroom, and you had to be there for 6 weeks and as a volunteer. And they put me in kindergarten. And if they had put me in high school or middle school, I probably would have stayed in the program. But man, I was like, I cannot handle like 25-year-olds. No, I do not like this. So I switched to counseling because everybody needs that. And I thought you know, I could use counseling in whatever I did. And so then I got my BA in counseling, and then I was going to go to seminary and go through their counseling program, which was going to be new that year. And then the guy who was supposed to run it, I don't remember if it was cancer, but he had something chronic. And so he was not able to run the program, and it was new enough that they said, we're just going to put it off for a year. So I went to seminary for a year and just did the general, we call it was the English Bible program, um, which basically meant I was not going to have to learn Hebrew. And I was like, I really enjoyed Greek. I wasn't sure that my brain could take the Hebrew piece. So then when I was home for Christmas, I ran back into Patrick, who I had met in high school, and then we started hanging out, and then we started dating, and I went and finished my second year at seminary, and they still didn't have the counseling program available, but so I would have had to stay a third year, and at that point, I was like, I'm not staying a third year to get a 3-year master's when I can have a 2-year master's and go, kind of start my life. So by this time, Patrick and I were engaged, and well, once I got out of school, I guess we were engaged, and um, and I just still assumed that missions was where we were headed, and Patrick wasn't like into it. He was like, hey, this is not in my plans. And so I just assumed that God would change his mind. And I just kept moving on with my life, assuming that eventually we were moving to South America. And and then it became clear that that was not happening. And I got really confused because I was like, okay, God, like all my life, I have thought this was the goal that you set for me, what's going on? And so for a while, I was actually pretty bummed and even angry because I was like, okay, did I do something wrong? Did I misunderstand? Did I, all this, you know, prayers for direction and like I'm obviously not going to do the thing that I thought I was supposed to do. And like now looking back, I understand it and it became incredibly clear in 2005 because I was diagnosed with lupus and I had been very sick for several years before they figured out what was wrong. And the doctor said, "Man, thank God you're in the States because if you'd been anywhere else, you might be dead by now." Because like it, you wouldn't have the care that you needed, and actually UV rays are bad because I think I must have mentioned something about Ecuador or whatever. And he's like, "Well, you can thank God you didn't go because you might not be with us anymore." Um, and and as I moved through my life, like I look back at all the things that I learned and the people that I connected with and all of those things, God was preparing me for something. But I think that if he had said, "Here's what's going to happen in your life. I'm going to lay it out for you." I probably would have looked at that plan and said, "Holy cow, that's scary. Thank you, but no thank you." I think I'm good. And so really what he was doing the whole time, and I call it the carrot and the chocolate, you know, if you know anything about donkeys, you get a lot farther with a donkey if you entice them to go somewhere. So God was hanging that little carrot in front of me to get me to go to the place that he needed me to be. But then as soon as I got to the place, and this happened over and over in my life, he would pull the carrot and then I would be like, "What? Wait, I I was pretty sure I understood what you wanted me to do, and now you've taken it away." And so it was like very confusing, and sometimes I was angry. Um, and then I started noticing, I'm like, this is a pattern. Like he will pull that carrot, but then he hands me chocolate because it's something that I really love better. So I should like just stop complaining when the plan isn't what I thought and just realize that he knows my stubbornness and my level of like I think I know what's best for me, and so he's not going to tell me like this is what we're doing next. And so you know even with moving, I grew up in a very small zip code, and it was even smaller then because not size wise, but there was nothing there. I mean, we had to drive 30 minutes to get to anything good, and we didn't even have a McDonald's. I mean, I still remember when they built a McDonald's and we were like, we have arrived. It was just like there was nothing. There was no one stoplight. And we do have a stoplight now, actually several. Um, and and actually we're getting Wawa, which if you are familiar with that, that's like for me, that's like the epitome of everything. I'm like, we have a Wawa, I'm good. I don't really need anything else because
Oh, all hail Wawa.
yes, they have the coffee that we want. Um, so anyway, there was a point when I really thought we were moving to Colorado because there was a job at Focus on the Family that fit what I did, which was recruiting at the time, and then there was a job at Compassion that fit Patrick. And so, I mean, we applied for the jobs, we did everything, we were in process, and it really felt like, oh, we are moving from this little zip code because actually I did get out. I went away to school and I was away from the zip code for like over 6 years. And I was like, I've escaped. I've gone to the city and I like have had all these fun experiences. I will never go back. But then that's where Patrick lived also. And so we got married and we moved back. And what I ended up finding was home has nothing to do with your zip code. It's about being where you're supposed to be. And truly, like I love where we are. But in the meantime, like when we were first married, I'd say the first, 7-ish years, I was still like, let's go do something cool and not live here in the middle of nowhere. Um, and Patrick was just like, well, like if you want to move, like what do you envision? Like why do you want to move? And I'm like, I don't know, I just want to. And that was another thing that I think, God was maybe using that uh, desire in my life just to make me look at other areas and learn about other areas, but he didn't actually want me to go any of those areas. So even those jobs in Colorado, like we really thought we were going, and then both jobs at the same time got pulled, and they said, we've decided we're actually not going to hire for these jobs. And I was, again, kind of annoyed and just like, I was pretty sure I heard you. Like, what in the world? And then Patrick's mom passed away. And if we had taken those jobs, we wouldn't have been there. And it would have been really, really hard. And so, in everything, as we look back over the things that are apparently disappointing or apparently difficult, it ends up turning out that this is exactly what needed to happen because like it would have been awful. Um, so so anyway, throughout everything. And then even with adopting, we got married knowing that we were going to adopt, and in our naive viewpoint, if anybody here has fostered or adopted, you'll understand what I'm saying. But um, we thought, well, we're going to adopt first. So these kids will know that they are chosen and they're going to like feel really awesome about it and it's going to be wonderful. And what we didn't understand at the time was, every adoption starts in trauma and there is no, um, I mean, I can't think of any example of adoption where it didn't start with something that was traumatic and horrific for the child. And so it really didn't matter necessarily that we were wanting to adopt first. It wouldn't like, even our daughter and our son, like they wouldn't have cared if they were the first or if we'd had other kids. Um, but it helped my mindset because when we found out in 2005 about the lupus, um, and the doctor said, well, in your case, you can definitely, move forward with having a biological child, but, I just want to let you know that like the first trimester and the last trimester can be really hairy, and so we'll have to watch you closely, and, it's a high likelihood that you could, based on your current symptoms, that you could not be able to finish the pregnancy. And I said, the image that came to my mind was like, okay, so if I had a toddler and there was a 6-lane highway and 4 of those lanes had like a lot of traffic, but 2 lanes were clear because he basically said the middle trimester we should be okay. It'll just be the first and the last. It'll be, scary. Um, it's like, oh, okay, well, like so basically you're telling me if I had a toddler, I could send them across the highway and those are my odds. And he said, well, like I don't really love that example, but yes, that's kind of what we're looking at. And so at that point, I said, I don't think that I am built to survive that. And I know that a lot of women have, but unless God just like creates a situation where I have a child, I am not going to intentionally put myself in that position. We were already planning to adopt and we're already thrilled about the idea of adopting. So let's just do that and it'll be fine. And that's what ended up happening. But what we didn't expect was that it would take a decade. And we went through um, just the weirdest situations with the adoption stuff. Like one of the organizations shut its doors while we were trying to go through the process with them. Every door, window, and skylight just slammed on our fingers. And finally, um, it had been 10 years, and we were talking about it, and Patrick said, "Do you think that we're not supposed to do this?" And I was like, I don't know. Like maybe we're not. Um, because there would be kids. I mean, I would find kids on the websites like the foster care and well, actually, at that time we were not looking at foster care because I also was I in my opinion, foster care is for reunification and I felt very strongly about that. So I didn't really want to do foster care because our goal was to adopt and keep the kids. So we really hadn't looked into foster, but on like the Adopt Us Kids or Adopt US Kids website and things like that, we would find kids all the time and like, oh, we could like this could work, and then we would inquire and we would like get our hopes up and then it would fizzle and just time after time. And so um, long story short, it was rough. And so we finally said, why don't we just provide respite care and be done with it, and we'll just help the kids in our youth group and we'll just do that. And so we signed up with this organization that only the respite care, their process was just as rigorous as like actually adopting, which was it's good, but it was surprising to me. So we finally finished that, signed the final paperwork, got the approvals on a Friday. Patrick had been away on a missions trip to South Carolina with our church, and I was going to pick him up um, at the church. And when I arrived, my friend Kim, who did foster care and knew we were interested in adopting, said, "Hey, you need to come see what I have in my van." And there were two little kids in there, and they ended up being the kids that we did adopt through foster care. So, like, not our original plan, but if we had had any of the other kids in our home, they would have never let us have our kids because they needed so much. So again, looking back, like every closed door felt painful in the moment, but God was saying, look, this is, ultimately going to end in good. Um, and some of you have maybe experienced those closed doors with the publishing process. And and in publishing, kind of the same thing happened. Um, I have a finished children's biography that I finished with my friend Jenny. She was a compassion kid and grew up through the program and then ended up, she wanted to become a lawyer to help kids, um, help make the laws to protect the kids that were like her. Um, and she ended up going through school, becoming a lawyer, and she is in legislation in Kenya now. Um, so we finished that book, and at that time, that was almost 10 years ago, I was like, oh man, it's done. It's going to get published. Compassion's going to pick this up because it's obviously a great fundraiser for Compassion. Like we had all these plans for the book, and everything with the book continued to fall through. And one of the things that was holding us up was the illustration piece because I had very specific thoughts about the way I wanted it portrayed so that kids could really, the whole book is to help children sort of get that understanding of like a different type of life that they have never experienced and sort of bring that to them. And there was no option 10 years ago to create that kind of art unless you hired a really expensive illustrator. And just recently, I was thinking about it and I was like, maybe God has kept putting us off because, you know, say maybe 6 months ago, I was talking about it with a friend and he said, well, tell me what's in your head. And I told him. And then he went on to some AI platform without telling me, sent me an email a few minutes later with these pictures that like were like downloaded from my brain, basically. And it's like, how did you do that? And he's like, oh yeah, there's this thing called Midjourney, and I can make these pictures. So that's like now an option. And so I don't know, that's it's still a work in progress in the sense that I don't know exactly what God's going to do with that, but now we can make that art without paying, $30,000 to some artist. Um, and I'm kind of waiting to see where all the lines get drawn with the AI stuff because what I don't want to do is create the book, put it out there, and then have them be like, oh, well, you created it with our program and therefore you owe us, 90% or whatever, because I could totally see that happening. Um, but so, that's one of the things in publishing that I thought this is going to totally go somewhere. And it, you know, again, 10 years later, I don't know, there's this thing about a decade apparently. Um, God's like, just wait 10 years. Um, and then even with the other books that I was writing, the very first time I pitched to an agent, they said, "Ah, I love this idea. I love this." It was a nonfiction book, and so it wasn't finished, but I had a few chapters, and they were like, "Oh, we're totally like gonna want this." And then um, I did the mistake that pretty much everyone does, and I was like, "Oh, well, I want it, to be perfect before I send it." And it was another 6 months before I sent it to him, and he never responded. And then the following year, I ran into somebody from their agency, and she said, "Oh, he retired." And the date that he retired was right around when I sent it, so it probably went into, some netherworld or whatever. Um, but each time I've thought, oh, this book is going to get published, or this is going to go somewhere, it doesn't. And that can be very frustrating. But what I have come to realize is, God's got a plan. So I'm not really too worried about it at this point. When I started 540, I didn't hear like an audible voice or anything, but God and I did have a little bit of a conversation because I knew He wanted me to do it. and I really didn't feel like I was the right person for the job because I have a hard time finishing things. And there are people on this call who are very aware of my, we just call it Becky's a basket of cats and she needs to be herded kind of thing. So I have, you know, a lot of help keeping things together. And I just told God, I was like, I don't think I'm your girl because I don't finish anything. And once 540 started, it was almost like, oh, this makes sense now because none of this will ever end. So maybe I am the right person for the job. I don't have to finish. Um, but, I really felt like he was saying, like, yeah, my biggest, honestly, my biggest concern, aside from the finishing aspect, was, I'm not an author. How could I possibly help authors learn if I am not one, if I haven't done the thing? Like, that's really big for me. If I'm going to go take a class and the person hasn't done the thing, but they're telling us how to do the thing, that makes me feel weird. And so I really felt a lot of angst about that. I was like, I am not a published author. How could I tell published authors anything? And and almost like I said, it wasn't an audible voice, but it was a very strong impression. Like, yeah, you're not an author, but I am an author, and I know what I'm doing. You're not an expert, but I'm an expert. You don't finish stuff. I finish stuff. I am the author and the finisher, so you don't have to worry about it. You just need to do what I told you to do. And so then, you know, that's what happened. I just kind of was like, okay, well then I'll just do what I think you're asking me to do. And if I'm wrong because I've been wrong in the past, just let me know and I'll stop. Um, and the thing that I've realized sort of recently, but a little bit over the last couple of years, is it's actually, for me, it's actually beneficial that I haven't. It's not that I'm not ever going to try to publish a book, but it's beneficial that I haven't because then people can see, okay, just because I haven't finished or published a book doesn't mean God can't use me in the writing world. I can write articles. I can help other people. I can learn the things I need to learn and pass those things on. Um, and I, I'm not the expert, and that's okay. And the more I talk with people, the more I realize God did this on purpose because if I had published 15 books, people would be like, well, of course, you know, she's in this position because she's done these things. And I don't know if other people look at it, but sometimes I look at it and I'm like, how did I end up here? And um, it's just kind of one of those, God's like, well, I don't need you to be anything special because my whole point is I can use anybody. And here we go. Um, and after starting, well, really before starting 540, I loved volunteering at um, conferences, and so just started volunteering more and more heavily. And um, I was at Blue Ridge, and Steve had, I think, just taken over Right to Publish, and we were talking. And he said, I think that you would really like Right to Publish. It's a little different. It's on a college campus, feels a little more academic even, and in a good way. And I think that you would really enjoy it. And I asked him, I was like, how do they feel about blue hair? It's like, I just didn't know if it's a little academic-y or whatever, like maybe they're not gonna think this is like, okay or whatever. And he was like, nobody's gonna care, just come on. And so I went the first year that he had Jerry Jenkins there, and it was a lot of people and more people, I think, than they even expected. And so a couple of us sort of jumped in to help, and it was a little bit funny because Dan Balo, who was directing at the time, like kept telling me, he was like, "Would you please go to class?" Because I was following him around all the time, like, "Okay, what can I do now? What can I do now?" And he's like, "Go to class." Like, just I sort of felt like if you've seen the Looney Tunes cartoon where there's the big bulldog and the little dog that's like popping around him and like, "What are we gonna do today, Spike? What are we gonna do today?" Kind of was sort of like that, just like go to class. So anyway, at the end of that conference, he said, if you would like to come back next year and really volunteer. Like that would be great. So I came back the second year and shadowed Dan, and at the time, like a little bit of me in the back of my head was like, oh, like maybe I could apply to be the assistant director or something. That would be so fun because I really, really like this conference. And I came home and with no thought for what was going to come down the road at me, told my husband, I said, if I ever get to direct a conference, I want it to be just like Right to Publish and maybe like with a little taste of Blue Ridge in there. Like I want it to be just just like these two conferences are just, and there are many others that are wonderful, but like for my personality, like it was perfect. And I was like, this is what I want. Um, but I was thinking 10 years down the road and or longer, I'm kind of sort of when you think about the number of years a lot of people have been working in the industry, I'm really a newbie in comparison. And so it just never occurred to me what was coming. And so then that following summer, I was at Right to Publish and passed Steve in the hall, and I had been helping him with CWI. He had hired me to help with the community aspect, just very part-time. And I was like, I really like the idea of what CWI does. This is like the next step. We at 540, we really work hard to bring conference level education to everyone. And then, if we could have these classes available for people who are like, I'm really serious about this. I need more than just, the weekly meeting. Like, this would be so cool. And I said, hey, Steve, if you ever sell CWI, I want to know about it. And he kind of chuckled and like, did his Steve thing and walked off. Like I kind of always feel like Steve's like patting me on the head. I know he's not, but like I just again that whole like, what are we gonna do today, Spike? Kind of thing. And he was like, oh, okay, but then a month later he called and said, I've been thinking about what you said, and if you were serious, I think, let's talk about this. And so 60 days after I made that comment to Steve, I was like signing a contract for Christian Writers Institute and Right to Publish because that was the other thing. He said, I need you to understand that if you want to do this, it also includes Right to Publish, and that's, a responsibility. You need to decide if that's what you want to do. And so I talked to every mentor I could think of, and every single one of them said, almost to the person, like you were born to do this, you should do this. And unless you feel like God is telling you no, you should do this. And the only person that didn't agree was someone who at the time didn't know me quite as well, but also was very focused on the business side. And the person was not incorrect in the sense that they were like, you don't know anything about business. So not sure this is a good idea. Um, and so I've worked really hard to learn what I need to know, and I still have a long, long way to go on the business piece. So we're not incorrect on that, but everyone else, and even Patrick said, he was like, I feel like sometimes you do things because you think you should do them. So like, just tell me, is this something that you feel you should do, or is this something you want to do? And take some time and pray about it and think about it and let me know, because if it's something that you think you should do, I think maybe you need to think twice. But if it's something you want to do, you're going to make it work, so we'll do it. And so we went into it with like just trusting God that he's going to take care of paying for it, because that is a whole other thing. But you know it's been an amazing little over a year, because it was August when we signed the contract. And then Dan Balo, he's wonderful and such a great example for me, because I tend to be a little high energy and sometimes get stressed out over things that maybe just I don't need to stress about. And he's just super even keel. And so watching him, even when I didn't know I was going to be taking over, I shadowed him that summer before we signed the contract. And oh, and that was the other funny thing, with the carrot and the chocolate thing, because I was thinking, oh, maybe I could apply to be assistant director, and then maybe I can kind of work my way into, eventually, being a bigger part of the conference and helping do things. And and after the conference, Dan and I talked, and he said, I know that we had sort of talked a little bit about maybe having you do some assisting and all that, but we actually think it makes more sense to have this other person do it because they're local and like you both have very similar gifts, but because she's local to the conference, it makes more sense. And so like again, that was a little bit of a letdown because I was like, oh, I really thought, and he said, we still want you involved. We want you to help with the community aspect. But it just wouldn't be the assistant director. And I was like, oh, well, okay, whatever, that's fine. But I was still a little disappointed. And then 2 months later, it was okay. Well, now you're gonna like have the conference, and I was like, God, this was not where I saw this going at all. So again, the carrot and the chocolate, like I don't get to be the assistant director, but now I get to like make decisions and run things. Um, and I asked Dan, I was like, I will do this if you will agree to stay on because really don't think this is something I can learn that quickly. And I don't want to like take over and tank it. And so he was like, okay. And I was like, if you could stay for 5 years, that would be fantastic. And he was like, yeah, yeah, that's fine. And then around Christmas, he said, I think you'll be okay in 3. And then right before Right's published, he was like, I think you're good. I'm gonna bow out. You're gonna take over after this one. And I was like, what now? So very unexpected. But I mean, he was like, I will be here if you need me. Call me if you need me. And he has like, if I need something, like I can call him. But it was just, again, one of those unexpected things where I was like, what is happening? Um, and but having had his example of like every little thing that goes wrong, like he's like, ah, it'll work out. And it always did. And so when he said that, I was like, well, it'll work out. Like, but but I have called him a couple times. Um, so all of that to say, if you had asked me 5 years ago, like, will you be running a conference and will you, you know, own a school for writers and will you have a nonprofit and like all of those things, I would have said, there's absolutely no way. Like, I'm not qualified. I'm not the person God needs to use. Like, he needs somebody who's been doing this for a long time and probably somebody without blue hair, because that's the other thing someone said was, well, you're gonna have to dye your hair back brown because there are going to be people who will make judgments based on your hair color and they won't give you time to say that you did this for a compassion fundraiser. They'll just make assumptions and walk away. And they probably weren't wrong, but on the other hand, it hasn't happened that I know of. Like, I mean, if people have walked away, they didn't say anything to me about it. Um, so that's been good. And keeping the blue hair has made it easier for me because people can find me. So, um, but God, throughout my life, I guess the whole point was throughout my life, I always sort of thought I knew what God wanted from me and based my plans on what I thought He wanted. And then He would remove the thing that I thought I was going to get. And so, particularly if you're in a situation where you are, trying to write your book and you're trying to finish it and you have, these deadlines and you have these expectations and, oh, we want this agent, we want this publisher, we want this and that. And it doesn't happen. It may be because God's got chocolate and, don't get so focused on the carrot that you can't see that he's offering something better. Um, well, I worked for Redemption Press for a little while, and I they needed somebody in a particular position, and asked if I would be willing to take it, and I thought it would be fun, and also it would give me a really good understanding of what it takes to get a book from somebody's brain onto the shelf. And I didn't feel like I had a grasp of that. And so that's part of the reason that I took the job was to help understand And it's a little bit funny because the position was project manager, which means there were lots of little moving parts and I had to move people along. And like that is not my gifting at all. I need someone else to be doing that for me. So that was also a learning situation because I was like, okay, like now I know what the people who are like I'm driving crazy are dealing with. So it makes me a lot more thankful for those people. Um, but while I was there, the thing that I loved was working with the authors, and and one of the authors had a book coming out, and he wanted it to come out when the um, the Top Gun movie, the new Top Gun movie, was supposed to come out, and he was a Top Gun pilot, like for real in real life. And so his book was about that, and he would wanted it to launch around the same time as the movie and things just kept getting delayed and delayed and it was frustrating for everyone because some of it was sometimes it was someone's fault and sometimes it was just no one's fault and but whatever it was it just delayed constantly and it was becoming clear it was not going to launch when he wanted it to launch and he was pretty upset and I was constantly just saying like I know this sounds trite but like let's just try to assume that God's got a plan and not get freaked out about it. And, we'll just see how things go. And then the movie got delayed. And so it turned out that the book was launched when the movie launched. And, it was something no one could have foreseen. And I don't remember the exact amount of time that the movie was delayed, but it was enough and it was they launched right at the same time. So um, I know that it doesn't always happen that way, but that has always been the example that I um, go back to when people are like, man, like this does not seem like a good situation, but the timing is always in God's hands. And sometimes we can look back, like with that situation, we can look back and see like this is why God did this, and that's obvious. Or, with our adoption, like it's obvious why I couldn't have the four kids who all spoke Spanish. Like, I don't know what I was thinking because I don't speak Spanish, but I really wanted this family group of four kids. And then, like, it clearly stated they don't speak English. And, like, I don't know. But like, I still pray for those kids, and they would all be in their like probably 20s and 30s now. So, it would be hopefully I'll see them in heaven and be like, oh, hey, I've been praying for you since 2004. But, there are reasons for everything. And, my sister passed away in 2021 unexpectedly, and I don't see a reason for that, honestly. But I know that God has something that, maybe he was protecting her from something else. I don't know. But he had a reason for that timing. And and when we talk about, our books, like that is it's not always obvious. And even after the fact, like, you can later be like, well, Becky said, the timing is always perfect, but I don't see how it worked out for mine. It's not like the way the pilot guy got his book. But we don't know. And, it could be the person that is going to buy your book that you won't ever meet that needed it in that moment, Um, and I've seen that happen we have, if you've ever written for Cindy Sprouls's devotions website, I cannot, is it US Devotions? Somebody knows it, and if you put it in the chat, that'd be great for everyone else. Because if you would like to write a devotion, they're really amazing. Like they will work with you to edit. Like the whole idea is they want to help people who have not been published be published. And so if you are willing to follow their guidelines to write your devotion, then they will and submit to their editing, then they will get it published on their site. Um, and I'm sorry I brought that up for some reason and it flew away because it's not my notes and I need to just follow my notes. But anyway, maybe even that. Oh, that's what it was. So like sometimes those devotions will get delayed. And there have been several times when Cindy's told me stories about how like somebody reaches out later and is like, man, I'm so glad that posted the day it did because I needed it so much. And it turns out that like, we're like, oh man, why did it get delayed? Well, because the reader needed it. Um, and sometimes, we go down a path that seems really, really dark. But if we are holding God's hand, then we can know that He knows what's going on. He can see everything ahead, and we don't have to worry about what the plan is. Um, and not to um, simplify life in a way that sounds hokey or ridiculous, but I do think about our lives in the way, like, as authors, like God talks about himself as an author and Jesus being the author and the finisher of our faith. And when we write a story, the character makes a change through that story, and they don't make a change in the story by sitting on their couch and watching TV. Um, and my daughter is funny because I didn't realize that I had trained her for this until she said it, but she knows that she can identify the protagonist in a movie by the person who's not getting what they want. And and so like we'll be watching a movie and she's like, "That's the protagonist. He's not getting what he wants." It's just kind of funny. Um, but that's sort of, in our lives, sometimes we feel like, oh, I'm not getting what I want. But if we get everything we want, our life would not be interesting. And not that, our life is for anyone else's entertainment, but like if our life happened to be a novel, like if God just left us alone and let us, not go through the hard things, we would never develop into an interesting character. And as authors, we put our characters through some really difficult things sometimes. And, one of the works in progress that I have sort of on the back burner is a middle grade fiction. And as I was writing it, the grandfather died. And like, it's a little bit funny because I read something similar about J.K. Rowling was writing and she came out of her room, like, I think she was crying and somebody said, like, what's wrong? And she's like, he dies. And they're like, just make him alive again. And she was like, I can't. And when I read that article, I thought, that's weird. Like, you're the author, do what you want. But then when it happened in my book, I was like, no, this is the only way it can go. And we think the hard things in our lives stink, and sometimes they really do. But some of them are for a reason. And so if you are in that writing space where you're like, man, I really thought this was going to go a different way, and it hasn't. Just know that maybe the story isn't finished. It may not, it may not be over, and or it might be that, it's possible God's like, you know what, you wrote that book because that was your practice book, and I really don't want you to publish it because like it's not your best work, and your best work is going to be your next one. So like, don't quit either. Just keep writing and keep going, um, and go for the chocolate. So. And I'll stop talking because I realized I don't actually remember how long this is supposed to go, but I've talked a lot. But I will say I was telling Steve about the whole carrot and the chocolate thing, and he said, here's the thing you haven't thought of. I was like, what? He goes, carrot, chocolate, they're both cake.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh, that was clever.
Yeah. So at Right to Publish this past summer, we had cake on the last day, and actually it was really close to my birthday. It was not intended, like I didn't intentionally do it for my birthday, but my birthday was coming, and I was like, oh, it's like I've got all these people here for my birthday, but we had cake, and I didn't think about it at the time. We did have carrot cake, and I think we had chocolate and something else, but Steve was like, oh, chocolate and carrot. I'm like, yeah,
Oh,
that's
that's really cool. Just so it's on the recording, Cindy's website is christiandevotions.us.
thank
Just,
you.
yeah. Well, people in the chat were really great to put it in there. So we wanted to make sure we said it so it'd be on the recording.
Awesome.
So,
Yeah.
yes. So if you wanted to check that out, you can. This is fascinating, Becky. Thank you so much for sharing so
Yes.
much of your story and the themes of that and how true and really are for all of us. We all have different writing journeys, and that's why we have this periodic episode to talk about different writers' journeys, and none of them are easy.
That's true.
But they are different, and we learn different things from different ones. Sometimes the same thing. Like, I've had the experiences like you were talking about the no's, and then finding out later, wow, I'm really glad that publisher said no to my
Yes.
the publishing board said no. We thought it was really going to go through. It had gone through so many steps. They said no. And then, oh gosh, months later, they no longer have a fiction line.
Right?
So, okay, thank you for that. Thank you for saying no. That I didn't get caught up in that. So, there's just all kinds of stories like that. Does anyone, well, we have a few more minutes. So we did promise we'd bring people back on. So I want to keep that promise. If you want to come on, you have a question, you have a comment, this is your opportunity to do that while we're still recording. Um,
It's good to see your faces.
yes, it is. Yeah, this has
Becky,
been,
this has just been great. We appreciate it so much. As always, you're such an encourager,
Mhm.
Oh,
and there isn't anything about your story that I can't relate to. Facts are different, of course, but still so relatable, and really appreciate the encouragement. It's meant a lot to me personally. Thank you.
oh, thank you.
I have to add something. I just realized my mic was turned off. Um, in all that time that you were saying, "Oh no, I can't be the right one for 540. I can't be the right one." I had been praying and praying and praying for um, over a year for God to raise up somebody to take a writing group, a Christian writing group that I had been leading, and nobody was coming forward. And one day God gave me a dream where somebody came from off the stage, off the side from where all these writers were, and went up to the stage and stood. And I didn't know who this person was, but that person turned out to be Becky to start
Mm.
540, a completely different writing community that God wanted to replace the one that I had been leading. So you never know when you're on your journey and you're going, I don't think that I'm the right one. I don't think I'm the right one. And you don't know if somebody else is praying and has been praying for some time, asking God to fill a space because they
Mhm.
know that it's needed. And God has a different plan than what I had in mind and then what Becky had in mind, but God put it together and made it work. And so always seek God and don't be afraid to
Yes,
follow him.
Yeah.
yes, that's
And I
great.
would say
Amen.
too, like if you feel like he's calling you to do something, just go ahead and do it. Because the one thing that I do a little bit regret is I said no a little too long. And actually, I met Eva Marie Everson at Blue Ridge and learned about word weavers. So that was sort of my little trip to Tarshish. I ran a word weavers group for
Mm.
1 year, and we had I think 2 meetings, and we had a vice president, and she and I were the only people who actually like
Wow.
met, because the other people in the area, it was right when COVID was happening,
Mhm.
and so no one else was comfortable coming, and so like it never did anything. And I knew in the moment, because I was like, well, we don't have a word weavers in our area, so I'll just do this, and I'll jump on something that's already established. And then it became really clear. It was almost like God was like, look, this is not what I said, and this is a great organization, it's fantastic, but that's not what I asked you to do. And um and so that fall, I talked to Eva and I told her, I said, I love word weavers, and I love everything about like the critique groups and what you're doing, but I think that God is asking me to do something different, and I need to do it. And she was wonderful. I mean, she was just like, no, if you're not supposed to be doing this, you should not be doing it. You should do what God is calling you to do. Go, blessings, and it was an amazing experience for me, because I was afraid she would be like, oh, thanks a lot for, wasting my time. And it wasn't at all. She was like, I get it. Like, you need to do what you're supposed to do. And
Yeah.
so if God's calling you, just do it. Because Brandy was praying that whole year, and God's like poking me like, hey,
Yeah. And at the same time, he was asking me to leave there, and then he presented me with coming here as like, as a co-host. And it was a leave there and come here. And it was like, well, where do I put, what do I do with this? And it was a trust me. So I had a situation where I had to close my group and then just see what God would do. And then not too long after that, 540 raised up, and God says, see, this was what I was doing. I
mhm,
said, wow,
It's the whole tapestry thing, right? The
it
different
is.
threads coming
It
together, and then there's that
is.
yeah.
tapestry that's so
Hmm.
beautiful, and we don't see the underside of what's going on. Mm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Every once in a while, God allows us a glimpse of his underworkings.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's so cool. I've liked too, Becky, how much you've talked about your teams and the teams that help you do that. And it's like,
Yeah.
every leader, every organizer needs that. And it's so
Hmm.
great that
Mhm.
people will serve in those capacities because it's just wonderful. No group survives when it's just one person, right?
Yeah.
And it's great that you give that shout out to them too. But I guess I just want to say that, whatever your contribution is to a group, it's valuable. And if you're the one supporting that person that's trying to make it all happen and like you said, keeping you reined in, keeping you, hurting you, whatever they need to do, but to allow you to then do what you're best at, the ideas and and all, it's just wonderful. So everyone's contribution is so needed in these
Yeah.
organizations, in these groups. So thank you,
Yeah.
all of you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you all. And
Hmm.
I'm I'm learning to delegate.
Yeah.
It's hard.
I used to say when I was younger and was involved in more different kinds of groups, as a young wife and young mom and all of that before life took a turn. Um, I would choose to be president. If no one else wanted to be president, I'd say, yeah, I'll be president. I love being president because you know what? I delegate to everybody else. It wasn't like I was doing all that much, really. It was just like making sure everyone else did what they were supposed to do. It was easy. But those were different days and different times, I tell you.
Maybe you and I need to have a conversation so you can download some of the, oh, this is easy to my brain, and then I can do it because I don't know. I just have a hard time. It's not even that I don't I mean I know that there are people who can do it way better than I can, but I'm just like, but if I do it, I mean, it's kind of like the mom thing. Like, well, I already know how to do this thing. If I do it, then it'll get done eventually.
Oh,
But if I hand it off to somebody, then I have to like tell them
you get
all the
nervous.
things about it first. And like honestly, like when I say it out loud, it sounds ridiculous because obviously it's going to take me less time to explain it to someone and let them do it than it will for me to do it. But it's that oldest kid thing, I think.
Well, yeah, I'm an oldest too. I do get that. I do. But I don't know. It was just kind of one of those things that sort of happened. And it was like, oh, this is kind of easy and fun. So okay. And I know here, like some of the things that have come up from Writers Chat, like Writers Chat Fiction, and we had, the nano stuff for a while until recently or last couple of years. It was like other people said, we should do this. I say, okay, do it.
Yeah.
You do it.
Yes. Do something.
So there we
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Well, another thing I want to say, and I won't like keep talking, keep y'all in here a long time. If anybody else has something to say, I want you to have that chance too. But as you were talking about, being strong and just doing things, a few weeks ago, I was reading Second Chronicles, and David is dying, and he's preparing all these things, the materials he needs for Solomon to build the temple. And Solomon is still a young man, I guess, at that time. I don't know how old he was supposed to be, but in David's eyes, he was a young man. He's my young son. And twice in that chapter, whichever chapter it is, David says to Solomon, be strong and of good courage and do the work. And it just
Hmm.
really hit me. It's just like, be strong and do the work. Just do it. Then this morning, I was reading Haggai, and God is taking the people to task because they're building their homes as they've gone back to Jerusalem, but they haven't yet started building his home, his new temple to replace Solomon's temple. And in there, Haggai says that God is telling these people, be strong and do the work. Just and it's
Yeah.
like, wow,
Like, hey,
that's
there it
what
is again.
David said to Solomon. And now God is saying it to these people. And it's just like, I hope that means something to somebody. If for some reason it's just resonated in my heart, and when I'm getting discouraged, it's just like, be strong and do the work. Just, you may not know all you need to know, but just do it.
Problem is we live in America, in 2025, and that we're results driven.
We
We're
are.
microwave people. We want it now, really fast,
We
and we
are.
need to see results. And when we don't see results of what we think it should be, then we think, I've heard God wrong. I've done the wrong thing. I didn't do it right. But God doesn't live and dwell and work in time.
It's
He
not.
works in seasons. And that's what we need to remember. And it's really, really hard because we're so indoctrinated. And that's how I see it. Just it's hard.
Yeah, it is.
Is it and I'm asking this on the recording, so now you can't really say no. I didn't think about that, but I'm gonna ask anyway. Is it okay if I put the right to publish information in the chat?
Yes, please do.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
please do. That would be
So
absolutely great. Yeah, we
so
want you to do that.
awesome. Yeah,
That's a
that'll be
wonderful thing. And see 540 also, if you want,
yes.
just
Yeah, that'd be great.
for anyone who wants to learn more about that group. And and the institute. I mean, yes, let's get it all in the chat so we have it for anyone who wants to do it. Okay, so does anyone else have anything to say before I close this out? I am going to, yes,
Thanks so much for having me. This has been a
yes,
lot of fun.
really glad to have you
Mhm.
here, and thank you for sharing so much of your life story with us. It was great. Next week, we're going to have a gentleman. He's a minister, but he writes part-time, Charles Hack, and he's going to be talking about the challenge of writing in two genres as an indie author. So that should be interesting coming at it from, actually kind of two topics and blending them together. It's like I write in multiple genres too, but I don't have a full-time job, and some of mine are traditional, not all indie. So, that makes it a little bit easier. So I hope you'll be here to hear Charles talk. My daughter Jill Lancourt, she is a big fan of Charles, and she's going to come on and introduce him. And she's got a message for all of us. She was telling me this yesterday when we were talking about it, that she has something to say to writers. So if y'all know Jill, you know how that's probably going to go. So glad to have you all here. If you're watching the recording, we do invite you to join our Facebook group. Just look for Writers Chat members. Also, check out our Facebook page where you can find all of our videos, and YouTube. We have our own YouTube channel, Writers Chat. Lots of videos there too. We've had all kinds of fantastic guests over the last years, and it's 10 years. Not all the videos are up there because we started out in Blab and those are gone. But for many years, we have lots of info. So it's really
That's great.
great. So we're so glad you're here. Thank you. Thank you to the 540 people that are here. We invite you to come back too. We'd love to have you with us on Tuesday mornings. So stick around for the after party and we'll see y'all next week. Bye bye.